ever looked at someone who seems to have everything? More money, nicer stuff, the life everyone says they should want. And yet somehow they still seem stressed, restless, or even deeply unhappy.
And maybe even more uncomfortable. Have you ever caught that in yourself? Like you work hard, you earn more, you get a few upgrades, and somehow peace doesn't automatically come with it.
That's the strange thing about money. We all want to use it well, but there's no perfect formula of how to do that. There's no one size fits all blueprint that's quote unquote right for everyone on how they want to spend their money.
But there are some really clear ways on how not to spend your money.
So there may be no one perfect way to build a meaningful life with money, but I do think there are definite patterns that tend to make people miserable with their money.
Things like comparison, chasing status, tying your worth to your income, and spending to impress people. Or how about this? Saving so obsessively that you forget how to enjoy life at all.
And that's what we're getting into today. We're going to be flipping the question around. And instead of asking, what's the perfect way to spend money? We're going to be asking, what are the habits, mindsets, and patterns that almost guarantee misery?
Because sometimes reverse engineering the problem tells you more than the perfect answer ever could.
Because the goal isn't just to have more money. The goal is to make sure money isn't quietly making your life worse.
This is 19 Ways to Be Miserable with Your Money, episode 187 with the Five Guys podcast. Let's get into it.
I want to start today's conversation with something that was probably the biggest insight that I ever had or truth about money and life. And that is that there may not be one right answer. But what I found is that there are a lot of wrong answers because personal finance, like we like to say on the podcast, is first personal and it's deeply personal. So what we do depends on our values, your goals, the section of life you're in, your personality, and your family. But what not to do, well, that's often more universal. Some examples might be there's no perfect way to spend money, but there are very predictable ways to use money to create stress, envy, regret, and even dependence. So, Dom, do you think that most people struggle with money partly because they're looking for the universal blueprint that'll work for them no matter what? Or do you think that they should look for what steps they can take to avoid the obvious traps?
I think definitely avoiding the potholes in the road is always it's always a good thing as long as you don't veer off the road so far that you drive off a cliff, right? And I think that analogy is actually perfect for what we're talking about here. Because yeah, I think people are always looking for the blueprint. They just want they want the answers. They want the answers, they want it now, and they want the problem solved yesterday. And what's so problematic about that is, man, I wish I could give it to you, right? I really do wish I had the magic blueprint and we're selling it. We're selling it for $10 million and you can buy one today on my Etsy shop, right? But that's just simply not the case. Um, like you said, every personal finance is personal, right? So everybody's problems in regards to how to spend money the right way is going to be a little bit different. And like we talked about, you know, it is about avoiding the traps. It is because there's a lot of societal traps, interpersonal traps, a bunch of different traps, I spend money because I don't like the way XYZ is. Hey, that's a trap, right? Something we got to fix, something we got to work on. So there's definitely a lot of traps. And I definitely think that, avoiding those traps and not even avoiding them, that's not even like the first step. I guess the first step would be recognizing that they are there and that they exist. So we can kind of start to avoid them and maneuver around them and really live a life with intention. And we said, you said something last podcast that has ruminated in my mind all throughout the week. And it was that it's more important to go in the right direction than to have like the perfect plan. Because too often we get stuck on, oh, Chris, the plan has to be perfect. I want it to be perfect. Please, this is all I want. And then, I've been there. We take our first step and the plan goes right out the window. We've all been there. But I love what you were talking about last episode it's more about going in the right direction than the right destination. And I love that.
Yeah. So I think today what we're going to be talking about is, if we take that analogy of walking down a path, right? Or maybe walking through like a dark forest you never walked through before. I may not know because maybe you entered the forest at a different place than I did. I don't know exactly which path you need to take, but I can tell you universally that, hey, you shouldn't trip on the first branch that you walk into. If there's a hole, don't hop inside of that hole and like dig yourself deeper. Avoid the snakes that are in there. Don't start just like climbing up or down random things. So it's sometimes easier to say, don't do all of these things than it is to say, you need to do this one right thing. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And I broke it down to a few different sections. And our first section is comparison, because comparison in our modern world, that's the engine of misery. So I want to give us some main ideas here of, if you want to be miserable with your money, do these things. If you want to be miserable with your money, always compare yourself to the group just above you. Always compare your insides to other people's outsides. Anchor your expectations to the most successful people you know, and overestimate how much attention people pay to your stuff. What I want us to get from these 4 points is that comparison never ends. The ladder has no top. Once you get to a new level, you immediately begin to look higher. And social media intensifies this by putting people that you would never have contact with in a normal world right in front of you every single day on your screen. And your brain can't delineate that they're on a screen or they're in a different place in time than you are. When we start to compare, our stress levels, well, they begin to become the highlight reel. Our bank accounts, their appearance begins to seem more insignificant every single day. And then our doubt in ourselves, our doubt in our confidence, our doubt in our abilities to even grow, they begin to delude our confidence. Many people spend money not because they want something, but because they want to feel accomplished. They want to feel like they finally made it. And these status games are never ending. We can think about some of the richest people in the world, Bezos, Elon, and you watch them and you're like, what are you doing? Like, you're just moving on to the next thing. And the moment you get there, you're like, I just want to have the biggest company. Now I want to rule space. Like, who knows where we're going to go after that? Now, then it becomes like, I want to conquer death. If we're trying to play the game on accumulating the most stuff, comparing ourselves and beating everybody else, you are never going to get there. But maybe you can try to change a different game, a game of freedom, because that does have an endpoint. And that's what we're trying to talk about here today. So Dominic, what do you think about this first point when it comes to comparison?
I mean, they always say comparison is the thief of joy. And like you said, I mean, we live in a society where I shouldn't really know what, you know, Jim Stevenson in Ohio, he's 17 and he's worth $20 million now because he invented XYZ. It's like, I I would have never known that if I lived in the 80s. And for me, it's like, that's a dangerous piece of information. But information is what you do with it. Are you going to let this information inspire you? Go out and do something bold, do something creative, expand? Or are you going to let it destroy you? Well, I'm already behind. He did it at 17 and I'm in my late 20s. It's like, well, how can I ever beat him? It's like, well, that was never the goal. That was never the mission. I think information is definitely, though, like I said, it it is what you do with it. And a lot of times what we do with it is not very good. It's pretty negative. It's very negative. And I don't know how we can kind of get out of that way. I mean, jealousy and envy, I mean, that's stuff of the old world. I mean, that they talk about that in the Bible. It's been around for thousands and millions and billions of years. It's always been around, right? Even the monkeys get jealous, right? You give a monkey an apple, the other monkey's like, why didn't I get an apple, man? What the hell? We're gonna beat this trainer up. Crazy story about that too. There's a crazy story about that. You should look into, if you have some free time, about the trainer giving a birthday cake to a monkey because it was his birthday. Well, they did not like that at all. But We're not here to talk about monkeys and birthday cakes. We're here to talk about how comparison is truly the thief of joy. Chris, I'm kind of curious, when you see someone at a certain level, how have you gotten so good at detaching yourself from that and being like, wow, like this is good, this is great, like, and just being happy for the person? Because I know a lot of people, I mean, when you see someone succeed, their first inkling is not to be happy for someone, it's negativity.
That's actually something that's a great question and something that I still struggle with today. So don't think that I've made it, but I can think of times where I've gone on vacation or even spent, gone to people's homes and they have beautiful homes, boats, planes, all this stuff. And like, there's a moment, there's an inkling in me where it's like, damn, I wish I had all these things, and then when you start to feel that, like, I wish I had these things, then you begin to get upset that like you don't have these things and you start to feel jealous of that person. So I think that it's a constant practice to realize like, oh, they have these things because of the work they did. And rather than sitting there and comparing myself to what I don't have, it's what did they do to get this? And then the next question I get to ask is, am I willing to give that in order to have these things too? Because I've had the luck in life to meet a lot of people who have quite a bit of money and a lot of tools. And I look at the lives that they have and I'm like, I wouldn't trade what I have for what they have because maybe they have a lot of nice tools, but they're giving up a lot of peace. They're giving up a lot of freedom to have those things. So that's where it kind of comes to. And then also realizing like we're all on different journeys. So like I'm not in a competition with these people, which is probably the biggest thing that took a long time to realize is I'm not competing with them, even though it really feels like we are.
And I'm curious, continuing that point, who are you competing with then for the people who don't know and
Yeah, of
who are
course.
kind of new to this journey?
Yeah, I think that the only person I'm competing with is myself, like competing with who I was yesterday. And that doesn't mean that every single day I need to be better. I need to be like, oh, if I didn't do better than I did yesterday, then I'm worse. But it's like you're trying to constantly grow and just get a little bit better, get a bit wiser. Whatever your values are, try to increase those because you're never actually going to hit the goal. You're never going to finally make it to the mountaintop and be like, all right, I'm good. I think the best way to think about this is like you can sit in your kitchen and cook for 8, 10, 15 hours to make the perfect meal. And even if you accomplish that and it's the perfect meal for you, you're not going to eat it and be like, all right, I'm good for the rest of my life. Like there is no mountaintop that you just stop at. The only mountaintop that we know of that you just stop at is when you finally die. So the goal is to try to do as much as you can to try to to try to get as great as you possibly can in whatever modality you like that serves both you and the group. So that when you finally do expire, at least you're like, at least I did everything that I possibly could to grow myself and grow my community.
And it seems like, the overarching goal, at least for you and what you're trying to bestow on the people, is that community is really the people around you. Those that's what really matters, right? Not the vanity and the I got a Louis bag and I've got a Mercedes in the garage and a $10 million house, but it's more about for you at least, how does my relationship with my parents go, with my spouse, with my family? Right? Those are the things that matter to you. And do you believe that those things lead to a more richer life? Or do you think it's better to lead more to a life of objects and consumerism?
Yeah. Always know that like I'm no guru and like I'm
Yeah.
never here to tell people like this is the way you must live or should live or the right way to live. The only reason that I say this is that like, I've tried both ways and I know what worked for me. So I'm here to tell people like, hey, before you go on trying to get on the hamster wheel of just getting more and more stuff to play this comparison game, for me, it was empty. And it took a lot of like deeper insight because when you look around and you're like, oh, I have the nice house, like you've seen my old home, like you've seen the nice house, the stuff and all the things, and you're just like, okay, but I still like I don't wake up feeling fulfilled. I don't go to bed feeling fulfilled. A lot of that has come from other things. And I think when we talk about comparison, just to go back to the main ideas that we've talked about, always compare yourself to the group just above you. Compare your insights to other people's outsides. Overestimate how much people are paying attention to your stuff, and then anchoring your expectations to the most successful person you know. And I feel like that this is getting harder and harder and harder in this world because That last point, anchor your expectations to the most successful person you know. That used to be, 100 years ago, but not even 100 years ago, before social media, before even TVs, maybe. The most successful person you knew was somebody in your town, someone in your neighborhood. But now the most successful person you, and I'm going to put this in quotes, no, quote unquote, no, is the richest person on Instagram or the whoever has the best content. And of course, they're not going to put the content of like, oh yeah, I'm like really miserable today. They're going to put out the best stuff. And, your brain can't delineate that. So you're constantly striving to go somewhere that really not many other people have ever even attained.
A lot of great information in that first segment. I'm excited to see what else we got in store.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next section, status versus freedom. The main idea is here, if you want to be miserable with money, chase status instead of independence. Spend so much that you become dependent on your bosses, your bankers, and outside approval. The final one is risk what you need to get what you don't need. Status often looks impressive from the outside. I mean, look at what we just talked about in our whole first section. But freedom often looks boring from the outside. The person that doesn't need to go to work, the person that gets to spend time at home with their animals or with their wife because they don't need to make more money to be able to sustain the life that they're happy with. A bigger house, a nicer car, luxury, everything can look like success, but it may quietly reduce your options that you have in life because now you need to make money in order to be able to afford to maintain those things. The more your lifestyle expands, the more you need to keep up your earnings to stay at the same level. And that gives you less room to breathe. And the harder it becomes to say no to things because you need to keep on doing that in order to maintain the life that you've grown accustomed to. So, what I would like us to try to think about, rather than doing the things that we can believe are going to lead us to misery, is to try to have a financial independence mindset, a FI mindset, and to remember that money is not mainly for showing other people that you have money. It's for optionality, it's for margin, it's for peace, it's for time, it's for choice. But too many of us, we miss the plot, we miss the path, and we end up jumping inside the hole. And we wonder, like, why am I not getting out of this hole as we continue to dig deeper and deeper and deeper? And that's going to make it harder to get down the path to try to find where the end is. So, Dom, would you say that one of the biggest money mistakes people make is confusing looking successful with actually being successful? Or maybe a better word than successful is free.
100%. 100%. It's so interesting to me. And I think you'll be interested by this one as well. And I think you'll definitely relate to it. And maybe you, the viewer, might even see it as well. But it seems like once you know certain information, it's so much easier to like read a person. Like I'm in a stage now where it's like, well, I would never rock like straight Nike shirt or like a name, like a super name brand, like rock the hat and like decked out and like all that stuff. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for me in my life, I just want it to be like a lot more low key. I don't, I don't want to be an advertising board. And it seems like when I do see people rocking like the Gucci shirts and, the Prada, this and that, right? I'm like, it worries me. It saddens me because, some people, when they look for an identity, they might join the military to be a part of something bigger than themselves, right? Some people might wear a certain brand to attach themselves with that brand, right? They might do XYZ. They might align with a political party and make that their whole personality. Um, I think it's all in an effort to try to give meaning to their lives when in actuality, I think meaning comes from within. You have to know yourself before you can be useful to society. And a lot of people, it just seems like, are wasting money on the wrong things. A Prada shirt might not make you happy well, definitely won't make you happy long term. A new car won't make you happy long term. I mean, it depends on the car. I was just kidding, but um, no, but I think we're definitely trying to solve these emotional problems with physical objects, and it just doesn't work that way. I think the most brilliant things people can do in their lives is to really look inward and figure out who they are and what they want out of their life, and then go chase it ferociously.
Yeah. Just yesterday, my wife and I, we went out with some friends and we went down to a place called Belmont Shores, here in San Diego, where there's like this little, what is it? Like a beach boardwalk with roller coasters and all that fun stuff. And when we were out there, talking about chasing status over freedom, they had, I don't know whether there's like a motorcycle show or something, but like all these people with these decked out motorcycles, and they're all just sitting in this like random ass parking lot, and they're all out there like revving their engines. And I'm looking at these motorcycles, and I talked to one of the guys like, yeah, I've spent like, I don't know, I think he said like 30 or 40 grand putting it into his motorcycle. I'm like, that's a good amount of money. And again, no judgment on if that's what you want to do with your money, if you have the ability. But I've seen too many people where they'll sacrifice their status, sacrifice their freedom in order to have status, in order to sit in a parking lot and rev your motorcycle engine super loud so that other people like can't talk when they're trying to have lunch. And everyone can do whatever you want. At the same point yesterday, I saw people who, like, you can tell they didn't have a lot of money because they were like struggling in line to buy tickets to be able to go on the roller coasters. Yet they're like topped out, like from top to bottom, in what looks like to me designer clothes. And of course, I'm not the person to like delineate what designer clothes is or not because I really don't know. But like, it looks expensive to me. So where do you want your money to go? Towards your freedom or towards just showing other people that you have status? Because if you remember the main ideas that we talked about, if you want to be miserable with your money, it's chase status instead of independence. Spend so much that you become dependent on your bosses, on bankers, on outside approval. And I think most importantly, risk what you need to get what you do not need. What I think people need is they need the ability to pay for their basic necessities. And you begin to risk those things, risk your ability to cover your mortgage, to cover your rent, to cover putting food in your mouth in order to be able to afford things to impress other people, in order to get the status that you're looking for, in order to feel like you're finally enough or that you are special. When in truth, no one's really looking at you being like, wow, they have those nice things. They must be great. Because most of the time when you're even driving the nice car or whatever, if you finally make it, no one's looking at you driving the car being like, wow, that person made it. They're looking at themselves or they're thinking themselves driving that car.
Yeah.
And then if I got there, then I would have finally made it.
Yeah, people are strange creatures, aren't we? We're very strange creatures.
We really are. And it's this is just tough. But if we are sitting there trying to think that our status equals our freedom in this like pecking order, and if I finally make it to the right part in the pecking order, then I'll finally be happy. You're going to realize that you're never really going to make it. I think all of it kind of comes back down to that level of comparison, especially when it comes to status versus freedom. But if you put status as your highest order, as the thing that we're attaining for, you're never going to be able to get to freedom because every time you get to a new level, it's going to just increase, 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 increase. And that really takes us into our next section, making money your identity. So if you want to be miserable, do this with your money. Make money the core part of your identity. Tie your net worth to your self worth and credit your own success to hard work, but blame others' failures for their bad decisions. I think the main thing I want people to get from this is that money is a tool, but it's not an identity. The danger of if I earn more, I matter more, or if I lose more, I have less value or I am less valuable is extremely dangerous. Once money becomes your identity, success begins to inflate your ego. But failure, it completely crushes your net worth. It also distorts how we judge others, to our last point. because we start to moralize the outcomes in that we say rich equals determined, smart, worthy. And someone who's struggling, well, they're lazy, they're foolish, they're irresponsible. But real luck and real life is far more complicated than that. It's easy to look at somebody after the fact and be like, oh, well, they just didn't do the right things. Where but I'm successful, so I did do the right things. When you completely overlook your luck, your timing, your health, your family, your opportunity, that other person's trauma, their upbringing, the structure that was around them. So we need to be able to unlink these two things in that money is great. Money is the great facilitator, allows you to do great things, but it is not your self worth and is not somebody else's self worth. Because again, if you want to be miserable with money, when it comes to your identity, it's tie it to who you are and to credit your success with your hard work, but blame other failures for their bad decisions. Because I know that we all do it. And I know even I do it. Where you look at somebody and you're like, oh man, the reason where they are in their life is because the bad decisions that they made. Yet in your life, when bad times come onto you, you're like, oh, I wasn't in my control. It's the outside forces that came and got me. When in truth, that happened to them too. So what do you think, Dom? What do you think happens to a person when their sense of value gets attached to their financial outcomes?
I think it makes for a very fragile person. Um, I think your value should come from a place that isn't built on something else. Should be built on who you are, not what you bring in or what number is in an account. Um, you're gonna feel pretty crappy if all your value is tied up in the stock market, right? And then say the stock market crashes. It's like, well, I guess I'm not worth anything as a person. I'm nothing. Like, well, if I'm nothing, then what? It leads you down a kind of a dark path, right? I think we've just become too obsessed with money as a society. And I understand I understand why, but I think it's important for us to, you know, as money becomes hard to come by now these days, you know, to start to detach ourselves from it. And as much as we can, I know we need it to live, obviously, but we really shouldn't tie our self worth to our money. We should really tie it to things that are actually tangible. It's like, oh, I know, if Chris was worth $1 billion or $10, I'd still know that's like, yeah, that's Chris. He's a great guy. He's an honest guy. He's a stoic guy. He's always learning. He's always pushing himself. And that's how I understand what he is. I know he treats his family good, treats his animals good, right? That's what I know Chris to be, right? Not like, oh, Chris is worth $1 billion. He's a good person. Yeah. Why? $1 billion. He's a good person. $1 billion. It's like, where's the logic in that? How does that even make any sense? And I think we just have to like look at ourselves, look at our lives, and ask ourselves, does this even make sense? And I think the more we can really look inward, essentially everything I have to say today, it's just look inward. Yeah, just look inward, know yourself. Does it make sense? That's pretty much that's a good chunk of your problems right there. So that's what I have to say for that section. Because man, making a money at your whole identity, it's a shallow pursuit and a dangerous one at that.
Yeah, I think it's funny that we live in a society in which we glorify the rich. We're like, oh man, I wish I had that kind of money. Like there must be such a good person, and yet in the same vein, we hate them. We complain about who they are, the awful things they must have done to get their money. Capitalism is bad because only the people that can make it to the top have to destroy other people and step on others to get there. Yet we say, but I want that. But if I did it, people wouldn't feel that way about me. Not to say that I believe that any of that's true, that like in order to succeed, you have to push other people down. That's not true at all, in fact. But I think it's so funny that we are able to hold these two competing ideas in our head and still say like, but I want that because if I did it, it would be different.
And I think that's just the silliest way to think. It's like, if I was rich, I'd be different. It's like, no, you wouldn't. Like, if I had $10 million, I'd give 1 million away. Like, okay, give 10% of your net worth away right now. It's like, oh, but it's like, well, it's no different. It's no different. Humans are greedy, greedy animals. And what
and
makes you think you're going to
hypocritical.
change when you get to that stage? It's kind of funny. It reminds me of a clip of this video game streamer. Her name's Pokimane, and she has these like cookies that she sells in like bags and whatnot. They were like so expensive. Everyone was like giving her crap for it. This is like later on down the line, and she was talking about how the rich are evil. They're so evil, and like we need to tax the rich. And she had someone on, and they're like, "What are you talking about? You are the rich." And she's like, "No, no, no, I'm not the rich. Not me, not me though. And I'm not. I'm one of you." It's like, dude, you're worth like $15 million. You're not one of us. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that's so. It's so interesting to see. Like, I would be so virtuous, so sinless if I had $1 billion, right? If I controlled these powerful companies, it's like, dude, it, no, you wouldn't. It's so interesting to me, and this is my final point on this topic, at least, where it's like, man, Donald Trump is such a dictator. And I don't like to get into politics and anything like that. And I'm just thinking, I'm like, yeah, man, not a good guy, not a good dude. And then like I sit back and think about it. I'm like, dude, if I was president, fuck, dude, you wouldn't want me as president, man. I'd be a dictator too, 100%. I wouldn't want the opposition. I'd buy up all the media. So it's like you want to blame a person for being evil, but also remember society is pretty evil. Like, we get what we deserve typically, and oftentimes it's not what we want. What we deserve is not what we want. But that's my kind of soapbox for that.
No,
Um,
I think you're right. I think a crazy statistic is if you make $40,000 a year, you're in the top 1% of the world. Like even today. I remember we went to my wife and I we went to Africa and went to Kenya and we were in the Masai Mara and we like met the people there and it's like these people like death is like a constant with them and like they're having to go out and like driving through their like neighborhoods or through their community was like oh my god like burning tire like it was crazy just like this is what people live every day like you have to walk super far and like through areas with like scary ass animals just to get to school every day and like these are little kids that you're like basically sending through wherever. And we get home and it kind of changed my life for a second, or you realize like, oh my gosh, like everything I take for granted. We go out with a friend of ours and they're sitting there, they're saying like, man, like life is so hard here in America. And like, I'm struggling, but if I had more money, I'd give things away. And like all these rich people, they have all this money and they're not giving things away. And I'm like, and in that moment, it's like, you're comparing yourself to like what while you like live in your house. Maybe it's not the house that you want, but you have a house like where you live in that you're paying rent to and like all these things, you have a job, you have all this good stuff. And you're comparing yourself to the billionaires rather than looking at like, I could be in like a slum in Africa. It doesn't matter how hard I work, how much effort I put in, how much anything, it's not going to matter because there is no escape. Like this is what it is. Or you could be born in like a place in India where you have a caste system. I know the caste system is going away, but like where it's like you are born fundamentally bad and like doesn't matter how hard you work, you're never going to rise up. You can only go to a certain level. And that's how like so many societies are. Doesn't matter what you do, how much effort, how intelligent you are, like you can only go so high.
Gratitude is a hell of a thing. Yeah, it's so important. Have an attitude of gratitude. And I think that, and we're kind of getting a little bit off topic, at least I'm continuing to steer us off topic, but it's definitely important. It's definitely a lesson that needs to be taught. But gratitude is one of those things that I feel like it's clowned on a little bit. It's a little bit cheesy. It's like, be grateful. You hear it all the time. I mean, I'm sure you heard it growing up. I heard it growing up. Eat your food. There's starving kids in Africa. It's like, yeah, understandable. Right now, there's just Yeah. Yeah. It's very real. And oftentimes we don't attach the realism with the words. It's just something a parent says. But it's that wisdom like you have, Chris, right? Where it's like, dude, I've been to Africa. I've seen it. Eat your vegetables. Like, don't waste. Be grateful for the life you had. I mean, you won the lottery. Not only were you just you were born, which is like a 400 and, trillion number by itself, but you were born in a time where, I mean, man, we got showers. Like, that's pretty cool. We got refrigerators. That's pretty freaking cool. I mean, you ever had the power go out and you can't, like, you got to keep the fridge closed? That sucks. I don't know. I think it's so important to be grateful and have an attitude of gratitude and really ground yourself with gratitude and understand that things can always get worse, but to be grateful for what you have. And what we have is a great podcast. So make sure to like it and share it. And with that being said, back to you, Chris.
Perfect. I'm going to hop us back on the path forward we were talking
Please do.
about, and we're going to get into the next section, which is expectation creep and the illusion of quote unquote more. And I think this is one of the hugest sections because it explains why more money often doesn't feel like it creates more peace, even though we really believe that more money will finally make us feel peaceful, make us feel fulfilled, make us feel whatever. So if you want to be miserable with your money, believe that more money would solve all your problems. The next point, and this one's a little strange, but believe that money would solve none of your problems. Let your expectations grow faster than your income. What I want to say on this section is that money does matter, and it can absolutely solve some problems. It solves money problems. It solves safety. It solves food. It solves housing, healthcare. It solves breathing room. It solves optionality. But beyond a point, expectations finally or often rise far faster than your income does. And the target keeps on moving. You're never going to get to that place of I have enough because the nature of striving is that it's going to continue to want more. The nature of greed, the nature of envy is that it always wants more. There's never a point where envy is like, all right, I've gotten there. Or where greed is like, all right, I have enough. Many people, they don't feel richer because their standards expanded at the same exact speed of what their income did. So one trap is expecting money to solve every single problem. And another trap is pretending that money doesn't matter at all. Because we see this on both extremes where people will say, like, if I had all the money in the world, it would solve all the problems. And then people give up on that game and they say, okay, so money is the root of all evil and it solves no problems. You need to be able to hold this a dynamic balance and find that there is a middle path somewhere and try to find that wisdom in the middle and that, yes, money is important, but it's not the highest order. It's not the ultimate goal of our lives. So, Dom, how do you think people know when they're actually lacking in something important versus just adapting to the new standard and calling it their normal?
Mm, hmm. I think it's a feeling. I think it's real. I think you wake up and you understand. It's not something that's spoken. Like you wake up, you go to work, you drive, you do your commute to work, you make your widgets or you make your sales, you do your calls or whatever you do at work. You go to your lunch, you work some more, you go home. I think it's just it's just a hollow feeling. I think you know when you're doing something of value.
Yeah.
I remember I went to a food bank once and we were packaging food to send all over the world. And when I left there, it was like, I spent an hour doing this. Could have spent an hour making, I could have spent an hour doing anything, right? But that hour was spent very well. And the fact that I'm even talking about it means that it was meaningful to me and it was meaningful to someone else. And I think that's what we need to fill our lives with a lot more. Um, because like the question poses, getting into routine, getting into like this is just normal. I go to work, I go to bed, go home, go to bed, right? I think routines can be a great thing, but I think also it can also be like a long march, like just a death march, essentially, if you're not careful. I mean, I know so many people where they're like, man, I don't understand how I stayed here for so long. I've been there myself. Well, I was on top of the world and now I'm at I'm at the bottom looking up at the summit. Like what happened? I blinked. Well, when you take your eye off the ball, you fall down the mountain. But what is the mountain? What is the mountain? You talked a little bit about trying to find it in our notes, but the last thing you said, Chris, that I really liked, and I wanted to just kind of go back on it, and it was about finding like purpose and whatnot. Do you remember what you said?
Finding purpose, when it comes towards expectations and like money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Money being like the ultimate purpose. And like, well, so for the person who's like listening to it, it's like, well, if money isn't the ultimate purpose, what is the ultimate purpose? Right. And I know what you're going to say, right? Well, it depends, right? It depends, right? I'm Chris Monzon Jr. right here. Um, but, and it's true, it does depend. But how do we kind of get to that stage where we can find those answers out for ourselves? How do we find those answers out for ourselves? Because I know for each person, it's going to be different.
Yeah, like that's the ultimate question, right? Like you're basically asking like, how do I know myself? Like,
Yeah.
Chris, like
There's no
tell me who I
blueprint, right?
am.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it just takes time, and it takes like knowing yourself. And I think the first step is becoming conscious, becoming aware that you have the ability to even do that. Because I feel that most people are going through their lives hedonically reacting. Like stimulus happens, I respond. Stimulus happens, I respond, and like you're basically an NPC. Like you have no ability to get out of that, and until you come to the realization that like, oh, I can choose how I respond to things. 'Cause I think there's too many people going through life. Person cuts me off, therefore I am angry because of that person cut me off. And like that's the story I'm gonna tell myself. I'm gonna run through the day being angry because that is what I do. It's complicated. It's hard. But I mean, especially when we get back to this section of expectation creep and the illusion of like wanting more is like this is the treadmill. And like it's called hedonic adaptation. As our income rises, so does our level of what normal is. And then we just call that normal and then we move up to the next thing. That's why somebody can go through life and be like, man, if when I get my first apartment where like I'm on my own, I'll finally be happy and be there and make it. And they get it and they're like, okay, this isn't it. Like I need a house. And you get a house. Like now I need a bigger house and I need this and I need that and that and that. And every time that you feel you're going to make it to the next point and finally be there, you're never there because hedonic adaptation happens basically immediately. And maybe you're someone listening to our, or maybe you're a listener, you're like, I've never gotten there. You can think of every graduation you've ever gone through. Elementary school to middle school, I'm finally going to make it. Middle school to high school, finally going to make it. High school to college, finally made it. College to an adult, finally made it. First job, second job, third job. Every time you got what you thought you wanted, you realized it was hollow and you wanted something else. So maybe the problem is that is the problem is not always that we don't have enough, but that sometimes we have a learned behavior that our expectations have learned to run faster than our gratitude has. And back to your point on where you're asking, like the wisdom of the middle way is that it is true that money is really important, but it's not the ultimate important thing. And you need to be able to find what that is for you. And I can't tell you what it is for you. That's something you need to discover. But I can tell you it is not money. I can tell you it's not that. Money can help facilitate what it is that that purpose is. But if you think it is just money, you're going to have a hollow life. And you're never going to find that because there's always more money to be had. There's always more and more and more. So don't be chasing the wrong thing. So when you finally catch it, you're like, I got it. And then like, it's kind of like chasing a leprechaun, right? Like you finally catch the leprechaun, then it disappears.
Yeah.
Like that's not the point.
It seems like in order to find yourself, you have to first get lost. And it's that first step that is the scariest and it's the most unknown. And I don't know if it's like a moment in people's lives where they choose to jump or not to jump, or if it's they never even considered the question or the idea. I don't know, it's
Yeah.
weird to be more awake than others.
And like I always say, sometimes the greatest way to like find your like level is not to ask or is not to have the best answer, but to ask the best question. That's who the smartest person in the room is. Not the person who has all the answers, but the guy who's like, oh, well, what about this? Or ask the best questions because they're open to growing. They're open to growth. They're trying to get better. I think all of these are difficult. There's not a right answer. And that's the reason that this whole podcast exists. Like we're talking about, like, there is no right answer. So let me tell you what the wrong answers are. If you want to be miserable with money, do the things we've talked about thus far. So let's move on to our next section. And this is really important, especially here to the Fi Guys, because this is like where we live. And this is ignoring the emotional side of money because money is highly emotional. We are not like logic beings. And that's the thing that I've always found to be wrong with traditional financial advice. It looks at everybody as like this rational actor. Like that's like the word that they call them is like a rational actor would do this. It's like, but we're not rational in any way, shape, or form. So if you want to be miserable with your money, treat every money decision like it's a math problem. Ignore your emotions, your meaning, and your soul. Ignore the hidden social and emotional costs of each purchase you make and have no awareness of how your tendencies, of your own tendencies to regret things. And this is just like we talked about. Like there was a perfect transition towards like waking up, towards knowing yourself, towards understanding. Because financial decisions, they are not purely mathematical. Regardless of how much I want them to be, they are not. Humans aren't spreadsheets. Some purchases cost more emotionally than they do financially. And some quote unquote smart choices look good on paper, but make your daily life substantially worse. And some quote unquote inefficient choices may be worth every single dollar because they reduce stress, they create time, they increase your meaning, or they support your relationships. Because the regret that you have in life, it really does matter. And I would say it matters probably more than the amount of your net worth or how much money you have. Because lifestyle design, the way that you choose to live your life and the way you choose to have money facilitate that, that matters. And your emotions, they matter substantially more than the spreadsheet does. You know, I think back to like my own story of leaving Arizona to move to San Diego. If you got out any spreadsheet and you looked at the numbers, you'd be like, that is the stupidest decision. Why would you do that? Yeah, we did it for something outside of the spreadsheet. Like the amount of sacrifices we had to make, it doesn't make sense. Yet we still did it because our emotions are far more important. Being able to spend time with family, being able to do these things. But if you want to be miserable, just go through life treating your money like it's a math problem. But most of us don't do this. And when you see that car, when you walk into that dealership lot, you're not sitting there running the emotional calculation of, or running the calculation of the spreadsheet of, all right, so this is going to cost this, it's going to take this much out of my budget, it's going to do all these things. No, you had a feeling that I would feel good in that car. And then you took it. So again, there's the balance, right? Of we can't let it go all the way to the feelings, but we can't let it go all the way to just the math. You have to be somewhere in the middle where there are physics of finance, where the math does have to math and it needs to align with your money. It needs to do, or with your emotions. And it has to do both of those things simultaneously. And that is why there's no one clear path.
And I know people want that one clear path, but it would never work. It would never work because everybody is unique, living their own unique journeys.
Yeah. So again, before we move on to the next section, if you want to be miserable with your money, treat every money decision like it's a math problem. Ignore your emotions, your meanings, and your soul. Ignore the hidden social and emotional costs of your purchases and have no awareness of how your tendencies to regret. And I think that's the biggest thing right there is you have to be aware of when you make a purchase or when you do something and then you eventually regret that. Not because you can go back and change the past, but so that you can know that for the future. And I think about this for like maybe, last night when we were out, we saw these people that like they were clearly like on a bender, and you have to know, like you go on your bender, you drink, you go too hard, and you wake up the next morning, like, man, I shouldn't have done that. Yeah, the next night you do it again. So if you're not aware of your tendency to regret things, you're never going to be able to grow. You're never going to be like, wow, I didn't like that feeling afterwards. So you just can't always trade your immediate needs of like, I want this right now to feel good right now. And I'll deal with the consequences later. Like F that guy, like they're going to have to really suffer. Like it's you have to suffer later. And it really means a lot for money. I've seen people who are like, I'm going to buy this thing in order to feel better right now, but it's going to hamstring me and make me substantially worse off for the rest of my life or for, until this thing is paid down. But at least I have it. Like, at least I feel good right now. And future me is the one who has to deal with the problems. We think about that with our retirement. We think about that with anything where it's like, YOLO, you only live once. So I'm going to go and blow all this money. I'm going to cash out my 401k to go on this vacation. And future me at 65 or 75, like I wouldn't want to be that person. Yet eventually you will be. So how do we balance these things? How do we deal with living for today while also simultaneously living for tomorrow? And I don't know what the right answer is. That's why I'm going to tell you what not to do.
So it seems like it's easier to say what not to do than what to do, as everybody is different, right, Chris?
Yeah, that's the point of this entire podcast. Is I can
Yep.
tell you, this is the things not to do. So we talked a lot about spending, but I want to talk about saving the wrong way because this is something that most people don't talk about, right? So if you want to be miserable with your money, save so save so obviously that you never enjoy a life you can actually afford. Become dogmatic and uncurious about money. If you want to be miserable in money, just keep on saving money. Don't enjoy your life. Don't enjoy what you can actually afford. Go through life just saying the point of it is just to accumulate more and more and more, to have more and more and more in my bank account. Overspending can make you miserable. Underspending can also make you miserable. I've found it's not as common, but it is common where people are over hoard, especially here in the FI community, but like people mainly in the financial independence, retire early community, where they just over hoard, over hoard, over hoard like a dragon protecting their treasure. But then they become like a dragon that they can never leave their treasure. And they have to just sit there and protect it all the time. There is a big difference between prudence, financial prudence, and being fearful when it comes to your money. Saving is a tool. Delayed gratification is a good thing, but permanent deprivation is not the goal. And how many of us have, or maybe not many of us, but that's not what we're trying to do because just like a muscle, if you go through your entire life saying, I need to save, I need to save, I need to save, when you get to that point where it's time to spend that money down and to live your life, well, you've worked your entire life, like just working on your quads, but you never worked on your hamstrings. Like you're not going to have good form. Like you're going to be unbalanced. So as you go through life, you need to try to do both of these things. Some people are so focused on optimization that they never let themselves live. And money should be there to support your life, not to become the mechanism of chronic withholding, which I think most people are, or people that like really go down the wrong side of the path is what they do. And they just use their money to just continue to, again, be the scoreboard in order to live out of fear of running out of it. It's possible to be financially responsible and emotionally starved at the same time. You can quote unquote win the game of money and like do everything right on the spreadsheet. Yet you hate your life because you haven't built something that you want. And that would be like to our section just previous to this, ignoring the emotional side of money and just focusing on the numbers. So if you want to be miserable, do what I just said. So Dom, how do you know when discipline is helping you or when it's quietly becoming, or when it's quietly just fear in disguise?
I wonder if it's never not fear. To me, it's like I'm disciplined because I don't want a certain outcome to come true. I go to the gym because I don't want to be fat. I'm good with my money because I'm afraid of being poor in a sense. And I think a lot of these things that we do, I think discipline and fear are honestly very close in a lot of aspects. Um, Discipline's not fun. Being scared's not fun, right? We're trying with fear, obviously, we're trying to avoid something. With discipline, we're running towards something because we don't want a certain outcome, right? I'm sure there's definitely a reality where, you do something, you're disciplined about it, but it's not because of fear. But I feel like a lot of it tends to be, it's like, well, I'm disciplined. I put this much away from my 401k to my retirement, all that good stuff. I'm disciplined about that because I'm afraid of being, 75 and running out of money. I don't know. I'm curious to hear your take on this one, Chris.
No, I mean, that's the reason I like this podcast, Nam, is that like sometimes like I've never thought of that. That you are disciplined because maybe you're fearful of the outcome. And the discipline is to get you to a place because you don't want to go to the other place because you're fearful of being in the other place. I think that's really powerful to like really think about that you remain disciplined because you want something and because you don't want something. You need to be able to keep again, it comes back to that middle way, that dynamic tension of like knowing yourself and like, why am I really doing this? Why am I being disciplined? Is it because I want this outcome more than I'm afraid of the other outcome? So again, I'd say there's no right answer. And again, to the point of this whole podcast, there's a lot of wrong answers.
Yeah, 100%.
But again, it comes down to, and I know like I hate saying it again, but like comes down to knowing yourself and like understanding why is it that I'm doing what I'm doing. But realizing that there is a middle way. And I can almost guarantee that the only parts that are not going to work is on the extremes. It's not going to work for you if your whole thought process is YOLO and I spend every single thing the moment it comes in, or even more than I have. That way I can live right now. And it's also not going to work the other way where it's I save everything. I save money that I don't even have in order to eventually live. Like there's pathology on both sides. And pathology doesn't work because it's too extreme. So that's why most people never talk about saving the wrong way because everyone as society says there's no way to save wrong, but there is. I think the other part about saving the wrong way that we didn't even talk about is being dogmatic and uncurious about money. How many people have you met, especially like I've met too many people as a financial advisor who are usually older, who are like, I know everything to know about money and I don't need to learn or grow or try or get any better. It's like, no, first off, you don't. And things are constantly changing. So like whatever you knew worked in that time and place, but doesn't work anymore. So we always need to remain curious. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I like about our podcast and we're trying to like really show people is to always be learning, to always try to continue to grow and be curious. Because the moment that I believe truly like in life, the most dangerous person is someone who is certain. Someone who knows 100% that they are right, that they know what truth is. They know what the future holds. They know what to do. Like there were other people that did that too, and that was Stalin, that was Hitler, that was Mao. Like they were certain. And we look back on those people, like even Alexander the Great, he was certain. And like we call Alexander the Great probably wrongly, like he was Alexander the Great. Like he murdered so many people. And like so did all those other people. And maybe one day in the future, hundreds and thousands of years in the future, we're gonna be like, oh, Stalin the Great because of what he did. I hope that we don't. I hope that we remember our history a bit tighter. But we have to be able to go through life and keep these dynamic tensions in mind at all times.
So, what would be our next point? I mean, we've got a lot of great stuff so far. I'm curious. There can't be anything else, right? What else do we have? I know there's more. You're always pulling the rabbit out of the hat. What else we got, Chris?
Yeah. So I only have one more section left
Okay.
on this, and it's something that needs to be talked about, especially in this day and age. And it's wanting what you're told to want. And this directly ties into your identity, your freedom, and your social pressures. So if you want to be miserable with money, let other people, let marketers, let society tell you what you should want. If you want to be miserable, pursue goals that aren't really yours. One of the easiest ways in life to waste your money is to buy a life you don't actually want. And many people inherit their scripts. They inherit their money scripts. I like to call them money memes, but what success really looks like, what adulthood, what adulting looks like, what wealthy people are supposed to buy. The danger is not just overspending, it's building a life around somebody else's values. Clarity matters far more than imitation of somebody else. I remember a story from Morgan Housel, and he was talking about he used to be a what was it? Like when someone like parks cars, a valet.
The
He was
valet.
a valet
Yeah.
for like a really fancy hotel. And some guy came in really rich and he's like, man, and he was talking to his rich friends. He's like, I just bought this chair for like, I don't know, he said like $100,000. He said, I don't even like the chair. And then Morgan talked to me. He's like, why'd you buy the chair? He's like, oh, that's what you're supposed to do when you're rich. And Morgan Housel came to the conclusion of like, my goal in life is not to accumulate so much money that I buy things I don't even like because that's what you're supposed to do. Like use your money as something that you want to do because you get to do it because you love it. But too many of us, we take on what success means to other people and buying what we're supposed to buy. You buy this because you're supposed to when you're rich. One of the most expensive mistakes in life is spending money to maintain a life you never actually chose, or maybe even never even really wanted. But every one of us is guilty of this. What does an adult really look like? They have a house, they have a job, they have this, they have 4 or 2.2 kids or whatever it is, because that's what we all believe. That's what we were told so many times that we believed that it was true. We felt that it was true. If there's one thing that you take away, I mean, hopefully there's a lot of things you take away today, but we as humans, we've developed over millennia in different species, but we've never developed the feeling of truth. We've only developed the ability to feel what feels true because we tell ourselves that it is true over and over and over again till it gives us what is known as positive or neutral valence. And then it doesn't stir up any emotions in us. That's when it feels true to us. Things that feel false are things that when someone says something that feels false to you, it triggers something negative in you. So you have a negative emotion. Therefore, you're like, okay, that doesn't feel right to me. But something that feels good, someone says a statement, you're like, oh, yeah, that feels good or it feels neutral. That feels true. So, Dom, how much unnecessary financial stress comes from people chasing goals they never actually or never consciously picked?
Not speaking to the finance aspect of it first, but I think everybody goes through a period of time where, you're a senior in high school and your parents ask you, it's like, what are you doing after? And I would say typically that's where two paths, go in opposite directions, right? Why parents say you should do this, go to college, get a job, become a doctor, whatever, right? And you're like, oh, I want to be an artist, I want to paint, right? But so many of us go down the doctor path, hating our lives. Maybe not doctor, but we can all relate to this for the most part, where you're living out someone else's dream for you, but it's just not your dream for you. And I think it's important. I know it's important as humans that we have these moments, these crossroads. They're so important because it gives us an opportunity to make a choice for ourselves, to live a life on our own terms with what we want for our life. And I think that's definitely a step in the right direction of knowing yourself. And knowing yourself is one of the most difficult things you can do. As far as, feeling the pressure financially, so often people will get nicer car. All my coworkers have nicer cars. I need to get a nicer car. All my friends, they live in house, they don't rent. I need to buy a house, right? Nobody wants to be the odd man out. They have this saying in China. This was back in the communism days, but it's like the nail that sticks out gets hammered down, right? Nobody wants to be the nail out on accident. But you can choose to be the nail out. You can choose to be the black wolf. You can choose to be different and chart your own path and know that, the hammer is coming for you, right? People will not understand it. And I think that's what you just have to be okay with. You have to be okay with it's like, hey, you won't understand this. You can't see this. It's like when Muhammad Ali, I think he fought, I might be getting my people wrong, but when Muhammad Ali went to go fight Frazier, I believe it was, and they're like, don't fight him. Or maybe it was George Foreman, yeah. And they're like, don't fight him, don't fight. He's gonna kill you. He's like, listen, your eye level is down here. My eye level is up here. When I'm up here, I can see further than you. I can see further than you. For example, it's just a small example in my own life. I got this table for free off Facebook Marketplace, and it looked junky. And I called my dad. I'm like, Dad, do you mind? Are you busy today? Could we hop in the truck? And I found this table on Facebook Marketplace. It's free. Like, I need a new table for, my bench seating. Like, it's perfect. And we get there. I'm like, oh man, I hope it's not gone. Of course it's not gone. It looks like crap. Nobody wants it. And we load it up. And my dad's like, I don't know what you're gonna do with it. Unloading it, we broke the glass table. There's no glass in it now. Um, you know, a door was falling off. It's wobbly. It's way too high. Dad's like, why did we get this? This is terrible. And that's okay. He didn't have the vision. The vision wasn't bestowed onto him. And a lot of times in life, you have a vision as a young person, as an old person, right? You see things how you want them to be. And sometimes they come to fruition, sometimes they don't, right? And you have to be okay with being wrong. Granted, it did look like crap for a long time, but I restabilized it, I shortened it, I sanded it, I primed it, I painted it. And now when he walks into the kitchen, he's in disbelief. He can't believe this is the same table. Can't believe it. I showed it to him the other day. He's like, "This is the same table? When we picked up the crappy one?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is the same one." He's like, "It doesn't even look like the same." It's like, I know. Of course, right? And getting back to your point, it's so important for us to make decisions for ourselves. And whether that's a victory or whether that's a failure, it's important that whether it's either of those two, that you made it for yourself. I'd much rather be a failure by my own hands than a success in someone else's hands. And that's just me. That's how I want to live my life and might be different from you guys. That's life, right? But that is my answer to that beautiful question, Chris, and I appreciate you for asking it.
No, that was all beautifully said. We should definitely clip that and throw it somewhere on throw it online. So in today's podcast, we talked a lot about what not to do. If you want to go through life, you want to be miserable with your money. We talked about 19 ways to be miserable with your money. I think as we close out, we should talk about what you should do instead. And remember that there are no right answers here. There's no one right answer. So it's going to be simple little anecdotes that work, but you have to combine all of them together and know that the right answer is somewhere within yourself, that you're going to find the right path. So if you want to not be miserable with money, compare less, define what enough is for you, choose freedom over status, keep money from becoming your identity. Let your spending reflect your actual values. Leave room in life for joy and leave room in life for future regret. Respect both the math and the emotions. Stay humble, stay curious, and use money as a tool for independence, meaning, and for peace. There's no perfect spending formula, but there is a better question. What kind of life is this money helping me build? So, Dom, if someone's listening today and they feel caught up in comparison, in the pressure, in the lifestyle creep, after what we talked about today, where would you tell them to start?
Depends. Um, I would say it starts alone. It starts with a pen and paper. And I think it's writing down who you are and what you want out of life and knowing at least a direction to go in. I mean, we've talked about it on this podcast before. You don't have a direction you want to go in, a goal per se. Well, every direction is the wrong direction. Having a goal can lead to purpose, can feel like purpose. I'll say it can feel like purpose if you're going in that direction. I think along the journey, you find purpose. I'm not sure how you find yourself, but that's probably where I would start. A good first step.
I like it. And remember, the goal is not to spend money perfectly. The goal is to use money in a way that makes life richer, not just more expensive. So, as we close, there may be no one perfect way to spend your money, but there are clear ways to make money a source of extreme misery. Comparison, status chasing, identity attachment, expectation creep, emotional blindness, fear based savings, living by someone else's script. And there's deeper lessons that I hope that we all learned here today. Money works best when it serves your values, not your ego, not your insecurity, not the crowd. As we close out, remember this: money is a powerful tool, but it is a terrible master. The more clearly you know what matters, the less, the less it feels like money is going to make you miserable. So here's our action step for the week. And it's really simple since you listened to such a nice long podcast. I want you to ask yourself this week, write it down, just like Dominic said, and be with yourself. Where am I spending money to impress, compare, or compensate instead of using it to support the life that I actually want? This question alone can really change a lot if you take the time to sit with it and be there. So, this conversation helped you think differently about money. Send it to someone who's trying to build a better relationship with it. And if you haven't already, be sure to like, subscribe, follow the Fi Guys for future episodes. But most importantly, please just share it with somebody that can use these things, someone that you see who is miserable with their money. And see how many of these 19 things that we talked about are they doing? And can they stop it today to start living a better life? Because the goal isn't to get rid of all of them today, but to just get a little bit better so that at one point you can look back and say that I have less regrets. And with that, I'm Chris. He is Dom. We're the Fi Guys. We'll see you on the next one. Later.
Peace.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the host and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.